Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you noticing yet another bright sunny day outside, we welcome you in. A quick shout out to our sponsors, at Affinity WES, that's at Affinity Writing and Editing Services. You can contact them on Twitter or on Facebook. If you do anything at all with words, they're there to help. That's at Affinity WES on Twitter or Facebook. Head on over to Etsy.com and type in Hippie Witch Vibes. That's Hippie Witch Vibes. They have a bunch of eclectic stuff that will keep you interested and give you a little bit of extra spark in your life. The owner is a wonderful lady who strives tirelessly to add new and interesting things to their collection. So head on over to Etsy.com, type in Hippie Witch Vibes, and let them know Silverlight sent you. I've mentioned a term a couple times in the past bit called the Velvet Revolution. This was what happened in the Czech Republic when the Soviet Union went under. Back in the mid-1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev decided that he was going to pursue a policy of openness and economic reforms, which was vastly overdue. The Soviet Union had remained pretty much the same from the 1920s straight until the mid-1980s. Infrastructure was old, things were breaking down. The system wasn't quite what it was projecting itself to be to the West. There's an anecdotal tale about a Soviet minister who visited London and who asked one of the officials, "How do you know how many loaves of bread to make?" And the London official said, Nobody keeps track of that. We just make it." So that really illustrates the difference between the authoritarian, totalitarian, supposedly socialist system and the Western, supposedly capitalist system we have. In the West, we kind of know what a customer wants. A bakery, a sandwich place, a hamburger joint knows roughly how many hamburgers are going to be ordered. There's going to be cases where a tourist bus stops by or a school lets out early and they get a sudden rush. But on that, they generally know how much product they need to keep on hand, how much they need to keep in stock, etc. The Soviet Union and its satellite states were never quite that efficient. They had production quotas. So they would look at last year's numbers and say, okay, 100,000 people ordered TVs. We know our population has gone up this much, so we're going to need to make 120,000 TVs for this year. The factories were then given their allotted resources. Now, one of the peculiar things about Soviet-style socialism, as I'm going to call it, which wasn't really socialism at all, was that there was a black market dealing in spare parts. So if you got an overshipment and you got too many screws, and you had a buddy over at the car factory who was running short on screws, the two of you could do a little trade. See, money was never really a big thing under the Soviet system. Rubles existed, but they were used for common people to buy things. They weren't really traded outside of Russia because Russia would trade goods, not money. They would provide you with new fighter jets, new tanks, stuff like that. They didn't want to give you rubles because they wanted the rubles to remain their currency. Have that in contrast with the United States, who gave their currency to pretty much anybody who wanted it. And that goes on for decades and decades. One of these days, I'm going to get down to breaking out why the Soviet Union was never socialist nor communist, but that's not the focus here. What I want to focus on is towards the end of the Soviet era. The difference between the Soviet system and our system was that the people that were living in Soviets, be it in the Czech Republic, be it in Poland, be it wherever, East Germany, they were used to the system not working. So when it finally stopped working, they went on with their lives. Bus drivers still showed up to drive buses because they were used to doing that. People still had kitchen gardens because they were used to stores being out of things. the people still went in to their jobs at the electricity generating facility because they knew the electricity needed to stay on. Now, not everybody was quite so nice, but mostly the transition over there went fairly seamlessly. The only difference is money went away for a little bit. And this is kind of what I see happening in China. Right now, their currency is being spread worldwide, which is the one major difference. But their people are becoming used to a system that doesn't work. Now, there was no real violent overthrow in the Czech Republic, in Poland, in Russia. Yes, they tore the Berlin Wall down. There were demonstrations. The Polish were out in the streets close to rioting. But that was a far cry from the Russian Revolution where they shot the aristocrats. It was a major difference from any other revolution during history, which is why it gets the name the Velvet Revolution. It was a little more easy of a transition. A person who was there told me that it used to be, as soon as they opened the border with Germany, the Germans would come over because the goods that were priced in the East German, the Czechoslovakian area were so much cheaper, and they were buying them up by the boatload. So they had a situation there where they were producing goods cheaper, but the Westerners were snapping them up, and there was nothing left for them. They still, at least in the 2000s, needed a separate permit for their cars to go on the highways. So imagine that. You have to have a regular license on your car plus a highway permit. Otherwise, you wouldn't be allowed to go between countries. You wouldn't be allowed to trade or go to Germany and get stuff for your money. But they survived. It took them a long time. They're still a nuclear power, although not really a superpower, and the Eastern Bloc, as it used to be known, has mostly been absorbed into NATO. But Russia went through a complete transformation. They went from a totalitarian state-dictated economy to something that's a lot closer to something that we would recognize. If you walked into the McDonald's in Red Square, you'd be able to pay rubles or American dollars just like you would in virtually any other McDonald's on the planet, and the Russians wouldn't bat an eyelash. The point of all this is that China is in a very similar situation. The people are used to doing with nothing. Again, I know a person who used to live there, and she was told, you are assigned, you've gone through school to become a teacher, you're going to be a teacher. You're never going to be a vice principal, you're never going to be a principal, you're going to be a teacher. She said when her family was young, they were so poor they couldn't afford rice. Now, when you think of China and the Orient, you think rice is a staple crop, but here's a family under the communist system that is so poor they can't even afford rice. Now, for some of my listeners, that's like not being able to afford potatoes. For others of you, that's like not being able to afford rice. Something that's a staple. Even the Buddhist monks, who are known for their poverty, still manage to get their hands on rice. So when they have such disparity in their communities, and they understand it, they know that there's other worlds out there. This is before the internet was up. They knew that there was a problem. That sentiment still exists in China. Hopefully, it's going to go like the Velvet Revolution. And just one day, a bunch of people are going to say, we're not going to take it. No, we ain't going to take it. We're not going to take it anymore. And I hope that song stays in your head. Because the last thing we need is a nuclear superpower going nuts and the troops deciding to restore order themselves. That will not go well for anybody. China has a long tradition of obedience and servitude, but they also have a long tradition of governments taking over from other governments. So to imagine that the Chinese people are going to sit back and do nothing is a major disservice to them. They do communicate their dissatisfaction, mostly by being able to break out of the great firewall of China on the internet and go look at Western sites, see different types of news, whatever they can do to get some entertainment that's not just provided by the state. So the beginnings are there, just like as in Russia, where suddenly jazz music, rock and roll, and blue jeans became the underground culture. Hard bass came over, which was an evolution of the European music scene. Slowly, the young people started to get ideas that they were worth more than a working stiff for 40 years to drink vodka and fall asleep. They got up, they got aware, and they took action. I don't think the Chinese people are too far behind. Now, it might not be today, it might not be this year, it might not be this decade, but sooner or later, they're going to insist that they get the same privileges that we have in the West. There's not going to be a new Cold War. They're going to try to hype it like it is, but they'll be nowhere close to the nuclear détente. Yes, China is saber rattling at the present time, but it's feeling its oats. And to be honest, they're doing it in their own backyard. It's not like they're the United States where they're having aircraft carrier groups all over the world to threaten everybody. China's taking care of its own. That being said, we don't know whether the people will go along with it. Hopefully, there's a velvet revolution, one where people don't get killed, but problems get solved. We can't predict a time frame, however. That's for history to dictate, and history bites. Wish to thank you for listening to the Silverlight Show today. If you want to support the show, like, share, subscribe, and if you can, hop over to our you can hop over to our Twitter at Silverlight Live. You can send us an email, silverlightservices@gmail.com, and there's a link in the description for the books that we publish. If you buy one of those, it helps support the channel, and you know what? It might even make your day a little more pleasurable. Ebooks starting for as little as 99 cents. But other than that, thank you for listening. And on behalf of the Silverlight Show, we hope you have a great day.